Hey guys, welcome to the latest edition of Tee'd Up. Today we've got Paul Woodbury from Florence Country Club joining us. We're going to talk about ground pressure. Um, Paul, if you want to introduce yourself, let us know a little bit more about you, how Florence is, and a little bit about your background.
Paul Woodbury from Florence Country Club. Little background: played college golf at University of South Carolina, and played some professionally on the Canadian tour, and got into teaching at our local course at Florence Country Club, and really quickly became a new passion, and very excited about it. Really enjoyed working with V1. That's really where I got started in it. Went through some certification classes with V1 and got introduced to all the pressure mats. Quickly fell in love and got some really cool stuff here.
Awesome, great. How long have you been teaching with ground pressure? And as you got started, how long did it take you from the time you got a mat till you really felt comfortable, felt like you knew what you were doing, and really had to implement it in your teaching?
Just getting a good introduction to it, getting it set up as it's one of those things you learn as you go. Really, as you see more and more elite players on it, you can start to understand the numbers that they're producing, and it makes sense faster than you realize.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, when you're teaching with ground pressure, are there certain flaws that you're like, wait a second, I know if I see it within ground pressure, I know how to fix it quicker. I know how to get a student to feel something better with ground pressure. So what are those, swing faults that you really feel like you need ground pressure to, to get to the root of the issue and to identify the fix quickest for?
Yeah, so the number one right out of the gate that everybody's always talking about, everybody's got an issue with, is the dreaded early extension. And when you can relate into tangible, quantifiable numbers about what it is they're actually supposed to be feeling, and it's a game changer. It really is. And so I've got a couple of videos that we can go over to help players that understand really how to use the ground in a better way to help keep their hips back. And so real quick here's a player who was struggling with some early extension, always got a quick high left hip, and this is obviously face on view, but I want you to kind of see what's going on here. And after a lot of training here, we actually were able to really peak his vertical numbers. So we're looking at this dynamic vertical force chart here, and what you'll see is when that pressure goes up on that lead foot there, right, he's ending up with 700 pounds of vertical forces. Now all of a sudden, when we get to his down the line view, and this was just him doing some drills with it, trying to understand some feels, here he is going down, and it really is quite fascinating how the hips are able to really stay back as he's going through some drills and feels.
That's great. That's a different way of seeing it with the dynamic vertical force chart. As we talk, through these different charts, so we have our center of pressure chart. That's the one that most people know and use. Then there's the velocity chart, which that's measuring how fast in centimeters per second that center of pressure is moving. But the one that really stumps a lot of people, and I think you use it better than anybody's, dynamic vertical force. So if you could quickly, explain the three charts, maybe something that you would use a certain chart for, but more importantly, go a little deeper in the dynamic vertical force chart and how you use that with your students.
Sure. So let's talk about the center pressure chart first. A scenario that I would use that for would be just say a simple understanding of some wedge control. So here we see that I'm 71% on my left side. This is me doing a little drill, and really just trying to make sure that we can keep that pressure up there while we're able to move along. What you'll notice is not a ton of lateral movement in this velocity chart, but realistically, just kind of trying to pay attention, not so worried about these. I'd minimize these at that point, and I would sit here, and as this thing goes through, would just watch how that pressure stays on that in the front half of the stance there.
So we're really talking about getting our pressure into our lead side, sort of coming into impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think most of our amateur golfers are, they hang back on their trail side, trying to help the golf ball in the air. And I think it's very important. The top players in the world, they're all into their lead side really early in the downswing. And I think it's great that the way you're showing that there.
Yeah, and so there's no doubt about it. Players are shifting quickly. We talk about so that's a big way that I would use the center of pressure. I really use the velocity and vertical forces charts the most, and simply because we want to make sure that, again, from when we really load back, and this would be a sense that you could check the center of pressure, but from this point is where we're actually starting to see that shift forward. And now all of a sudden, I want to see a peak lateral through the transition. So that peak lateral really has to happen before this peak vertical on that lead side. And so that's something that we're definitely looking for in the timing and sequencing of this. So that velocity right there, and again, that's 272 centimeters a second. We've got, again, we come over here. As we get going, you can see how that lateral's peaking right through transition there into that downswing. Something we definitely pay attention to. All right, let's go. We get even some guys who are, so there we go. All right. When we get into vertical numbers, one of the things that we tend to see, so that, well, I guess we're editing some of this. So once we move away from that velocity chart, we really start to look into some of these vertical forces. And again, the key with this vertical forces, it allows a lot of players to actually stay in posture. And so as we go through this, what we're going to start to see is really getting close to lead arm parallel. We're already max pressure really shifting into that lead side. And what players don't realize, and a lot of times, is that the fact is, it's not just a shift across the top of the ground, right? It's actually pressing into the ground that allows us to start to shift. So we like to see a peak vertical starting somewhere in that left arm parallel range. And from there, we've seen max speeds actually with drivers happening when the club starts to valley, when that peak chart and that lead foot here that we're talking about actually valleys out right after impact there, which allows us to help him release the golf club. See, in this downshift here, he's able to create a lot of angles. Something that helps him get rid of those angles or actually being able to push up and out, which is going to help him release this golf club. Big hitter of the ball there. Same thing over here. Starting to see a massive shift down. Guys who really press into the ground, you see their hips staying back. You see a lot of angle being created, and that push up is what actually helps them release the golf club and get rid of that.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So you're almost arm parallel to the ground on the way down. You're wanting to see the max pressure in the lead side there.
Correct. With drivers.
And you're wanting to see it lighten up coming into impact.
That's correct. So it's actually maxed down at the point where you're starting to push back up. And so, yes, as it gets to, as that's all up, again, that club's releasing at its fastest point.
That's interesting. It's a different way that I hear other people talk about it. There's a lot of confusion within dynamic vertical force. And honestly, the way you explain it sounds pretty simple when you look at it that way. I know you mentioned, you talk about, using the body to maximize swing speed, and you use your dynamic vertical force to do that. So is that
Correct.
sort of what you're explaining in that instance?
So that is what we're explaining in that instance. If you're able to put 2.5 times your body weight into the ground there, 2.5 times your body weight into the ground at lead arm parallel, you're really maximizing this shift over. And so what happens as an iron, we're actually going to see that later. And that's what we're kind of getting into versus the speed of it, and actually how this vertical chart can actually help control release points of the golf club. So we're still pressing down here, which is why we're coming in more over the ball. The post up is significantly later versus, again, a guy who's trying to generate a little extra club head speed and hit up on the ball. So, yes, that's the way our body can help control release points and speeds.
That's awesome. That's great. So now, how does this timing, would it affect shot shape?
So absolutely, so the later that vertical is, the easier it is to shallow the golf club, right? As we tend to shift over to that lead side, really press over, that tends to help our lateral movement and helps us shallow the golf club out, gets a release that goes a little more down the line. You see this player over here actually, because he does this really early, right? Posts up, it's almost at its peak valley there. He's actually pushing back, creating all this space, and this is going to be a cut player. He's got a lot of space to release this club to the left. We can look at his from down the line as well, and just the ability for him to maintain hip depth, being able to push that hard down into the ground, right? We're actually starting to see through that transition, that's when the butt stays back. It would be no different than saying, well, do we just sit back in our heels, or is it the fact that we actually press down into the ground? Like if we were going to do a jump. If we were going to do a jump, we're going to press into the balls of the feet, and the butt goes back and we lower, and we stay in the balls of the feet. So that's really how we've kind of maximized this.
So that's interesting that you say that, because a lot of people, when we talk early extension, they're saying got to keep your weight back in your heels to avoid early extension.
Correct.
It seems like if they're athletic enough and they're using the ground properly, and they're powerful enough, they're able to get on their toes, they're able to maintain that spine angle and keep their butt back by using the ground more powerfully.
100%. Just like if you were going to sit there and jump, you're going to go down into the balls of the feet, your butt's going to go back, chest goes over the ball, you're ready to go.
That's awesome. Definitely. The way you explain it makes it sound so simple. And you do it in a way that, I haven't heard others do it, which is fabulous.
I appreciate that.
Just one last question. As golf instructors, you fall in love with instructing the game and teaching, but first passion is always playing. So what are something that you've learned about your own golf swing within using ground pressure, and how has that helped you?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I never really was able to generate a lot of speed as a player growing up and even in college. Had a good playing career, and really I remember getting on TrackMan with Titleist at South Carolina, and the rep kind of making fun of me because I was only hitting 103 miles an hour club head speed. And I'm like, well, help me out. I'm trying to go faster. He's like, try swinging harder. I'm like, I'm giving it all I've got. And so when I jumped on the pressure mats, I wasn't generating any vertical movements at all. So everything was sitting on top of the ground. And so to this day, now 36 years old, and I can sit here and generate over 115 club head speed by maxing out vertical movements. So it's something I definitely have a personal relationship to, which is, again, makes it a little bit more of a passion.
That's awesome. It's one of those things, so we learned to play when we were young, toe the club up in the air on both sides, all those fun things. But
don't move your feet.
Yeah, right. With all this technology and able to slow things down and see things, even more finite, it's crazy how much teaching and instruction has changed over the years.
100%.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you for your time. You know, again, we've asked you to be on this because you do this better than most. You make it very easy to understand. You explain something very complex in a simple way, and we really enjoy having you on here.
Well, I really appreciate y'all having me.
Awesome. Hey,
Thank you.
thanks, Paul.